Mike's Unleashed, coming back at you again for a hot new episode with your man D Mega here.
And Hawk.
All right, the topic we got on the table today is the history of violence in black music, predominantly
Mm,
hip hop. Yo, I think we should
absolutely.
talk about it. Let's talk about
Let's
it,
talk
Hawk.
about it. All right, let's turn our mics up. Let's get on it.
Let's get into it. What you got
All
to say
right, all
about
right.
it?
So here's what I have to say about it. Ever since back to the days of NWA and probably slightly before that, there's been, that was the first known gangster rap music, which was part of the culture, part of hip hop, and they were making a statement. But today, whether it was, police brutality, they wanted to bring an eye on that, or they wanted to accentuate, what was really going on in the African American community, in places
Right.
like LA and throughout the US and probably throughout the world. And so part of that was in the culture, in the music. There was a way to express themselves. But it seems to me that now it's gone further than that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's still the same?
No, no, no. I definitely think the way that rap has evolved over the years has definitely changed. And as you mentioned back in the, let's say late 80s, early 2000s and things about back then, rap had a different tone to it. It was
Mm,
something that they were speaking about, an actual message back then. Like you said, they were about, what was going on in the world to a degree, but you started with like the NWA, the Ice T, they were really singing about or rapping about other aspects, I don't even want to drop it and say F the police. They was talking about, colors. They was talking about the gangs and everything
mm-hmm,
of that nature. And I believe back then they were opening our eyes to, their community and what they were dealing with. But over the years,
mm-hmm.
it has definitely changed. And I think the culture and rap music has taken not necessarily a hit, but we've adapted some of those views in a very negative way that has impacted, you know, the whole
Mm-hmm.
industry right there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's definitely not the same as you touched on. It's not the same in the meaning of what was happening and what they were trying to illustrate in their music isn't the same as to what is illustrated today. Today is very much not that. Some artists still talk about that. Some artists are deep into the cultural aspect and what it really means to express themselves and express what's going on in the community. But a lot of the artists, the other side of the artists, aren't the ones that are really talking about that. A lot of them are talking
Mhm.
about flashy cars, money, um, women being sexual objects, how they got fast-paced lifestyles, and that music is rolled down to the youth and the communities who want to mimic that same type behavior. And so, to me, it has become where it was a positive thing, it's becoming more and more negative. And those iconic figures back in the day that were really about the cultural, they're kind of getting left in the dust and really we're forgetting what it really meant to be in that hip hop culture. It's just changed so much.
Very, very much so. And one of the key things I think you forgot to actually address, and I know you didn't do it, but the simple fact of one of the key things that are in all of the rap lyrics today that wasn't happening back then was drugs.
Mm,
Drugs are a huge thing that it seems that rappers nowadays, that seems to be all they really talk about. Back then it wasn't
facts.
something that was really bragged about back then. And when I'm saying back then, like I said, we're talking about the early early 80s 90s. Things are very different, but taking on how drugs came into the whole black community, it gave them something to rap about. And once you introduce drugs into the community, it had a negative effect on the black community. But furthermore, all we started doing was clearly just rapping about it and as you said, perpetuating it, and the impact that
Hmm.
it's provided has just been extremely negative. Now, the music itself is great. We're not saying anything bad about the music,
Hmm.
but we just seems to think that the message has clearly been lost from where it started to where it is now.
Absolutely, it has totally been lost in translation, right? It's almost like we lost sight of the prize ahead, and that was the idea behind rap music expression. Because rap music and hip hop. I mean, you look what they've done in the community, from fashion to technical to entrepreneurship to creating generational wealth. to these young artists. But we've lost sight of that. And the reason we lost sight of that is because, that's not what's being pushed. The artist that hasn't gotten in trouble in the community, that hasn't been arrested, that hasn't shot somebody, that's not the artist that is put on the forefront, that is not celebrated. That's not the artist. The artist that sells money, like any industry, like any movie, sex, drugs, and violence. Those are the artists that are celebrated. And that's unfortunate because that leaves all the artists that are potentially exceptional role models in the dust, right? You have those artists like Common and things like that that should be celebrated more, even though that's a different age gap for our community, for the current generation. But artists with a similar message like that aren't celebrated as much. You hear more about artists that want to talk about gun violence, hustling in in the hood, in the trap, whatever it is, back and living that lifestyle. That's what they want to talk about, and that's what's celebrated. But that's not their fault either, though. You have to look at the CEOs.
D-Magger here, one half of Mike's Unleashed. We appreciate everyone taking the time and supporting us, watching our videos. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Hey, stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 of this topic. More to come. Appreciate it. Mike's Unleashed, turning my mic up.